Part by Allstate and the Searle Funds at the Chicago Community Trust.
Good evening y bienvenidos to Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. I'm Alex Hernandez of Univision Chicago Primera Hora, which airs every weekday morning at 5 and 6. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, a 2021 measure intended to slow gentrification in Pilsen and along the 606 has been extended for another 2 years. We'll get into it and what it could mean for residents. A new book examines why many Latinos continue to lack health insurance after the passage of the Affordable Care Act. We'll talk to the book's author. An exhibit at UIC's Richard J. Daley Library explores the brief but brilliant life of Chicago activist and organizer Rudy Lozano.
If I can work with animals plus my best friend, sold.
And meet a best friend duo bringing Mexican designs to Chicagoans and their pets. First off tonight, City Council voted this week to extend an ordinance aimed at slowing gentrification and displacement in Pilsen and areas near the 606 trail. The 606 Pilsen demolition permit surcharge ordinance was extended to April 1st, 2024. The measure imposes a fee of $15,000 or $5,000 per unit, whichever is greater, on permits for the demolition of buildings with residential units along the 606 trail and in Pilsen, one of the city's most in-demand real estate markets. The money is said to go to the Chicago Community Land Trust to support affordable housing needs within these two areas. Joining us now to talk about the ordinance and the future of the communities impacted are John Betancourt, a USC professor of urban planning and policy who studied gentrification in Pilsen. Jose Perez, a longtime Pilsen resident and owner of several properties. And Raul Raimundo, CEO of the Resurrection Project. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to start with you, Raul. Let's talk about city leaders that say this ordinance, along with two other ordinances aimed at protecting existing multi-unit buildings, will reduce the displacement of low to moderate income residents and help maintain the neighborhood's character and affordability. What do you think of this demolition fee? Is it a positive thing for the community?
I think the ordinance has had limited successes. I think it's prevented certainly somebody to think twice about demolition. I think the fee itself, in my opinion, is too low. I think the number of permits that have been requested for demolition is very minimum. So the fact that it got extended is a good idea because it'll give us more time, more opportunities to really evaluate whether or not this is long-term a success. Because in communities like Pilsen, you do want to avoid demolitions, in my opinion, at the expense of creating very high developments that are challenging and displacing families who have been here for a very long time. I don't have a problem with welcoming families, newcomers to the community, but we also want to make sure that existing families who've been here for a very long time also have the opportunity to benefit from the prosperity of the community. And that's what the Resurrection Project has been doing for years, right. Preserving affordability, creating affordability, making sure that the community is healthier and benefits everyone.
Jose, as a longtime Pilsen resident, what's your opinion? Do you agree actually with the charging property owners and developers a fee to knock down buildings?
Well, I think it should be more of a case-by-case basis because I'm also an insurance agent in Pilsen, and I've insured hundreds, if not thousands, of properties here in Pilsen. So in my point of view, the reason I believe it should be a case-by-case is because some of these properties are really dilapidated. I don't think some of these properties even should still be around. So that's my personal opinion when it comes to, I think the fee, as long as it comes back to the community, I think that's a great thing. But to just say, we're just going to do it overall for everybody, I think maybe we could modify that and see if we can do better. Because as you can see, of course, over 20 years of insuring these properties, some of them really need, there's no such thing as rehab for them. So okay. I think they need to come down.
And going with you, John, Housing Commissioner Marisa Novara says this demolition surcharge seems to be working. Demolitions have declined 88% along the 606 Trail and 25% in Pilsen from pre-pandemic levels. How does reducing demolition play a role in protecting affordable housing?
Well, it depends on the type of demolition, and it depends on what is placed in the demolished unit. I think Pilsen's integrity is very important. I think the ordinance that forces people that want to rehab their buildings to keep the same number of units is great. It saves the integrity of the community. I think that this penalty for demolition, with Raul, I agree, is too low. I don't think I think many developers can afford $5,000 to $1,000 per unit or $15,000. It is the small developer that probably cannot afford that fee. But I think the gentrification should also cover the big developers. This is a nice measure, but I think it has to be accompanied by many others if they truly want to accomplish what they want.
Actually, only one city council member voted against the surcharge during Monday's Finance Committee meeting. That was 15th Ward Alderman Raymond Lopez. Let's take a listen.
When you have individuals who have been in communities 20, 30, 40, 50 years and decide to try to cash in on their equity, as is the tradition of owning a home and creating generational wealth, fees like this steal that equity from underneath them.
Well, Jose, I'm going with you. What do you think of Alderman Lopez's argument that this fee isn't fair to property owners?
Well, again, I mean, if you own the property, you should be able to do whatever you feel is actually the best thing for you. Because we also have to look at it that, I know that this is community, and I know that we're talking about where neighborhoods where people live at, especially in Pilsen. But people don't just buy properties because they want to live there, right? It's an investment. So we have to treat it like it's a business itself. Now, if we're trying to limit, what the community, where it stays more of a local neighborhood and everything like that, I understand the fee. Mm-hmm. And maybe there should be levels of it does seem a little low, because $5,000 to $15,000, that's probably, a drop in the bucket for some of these investors. Right. But at the end of the day, we have to look at it that these buildings are, you rarely see a single family unit here in Pilsen. So besides those, with the exception of those, everything else, you have to treat it like a business. That additional unit, yes, somebody's going to live there, but it is still considered.
I want to give everybody time. So now I want to go with Raul, because we have less than 3 minutes actually for this segment. Yeah. So Raul, what's your response to the alderman's position?
Just quickly, we believe in building wealth for families, and home ownership opportunities are critical to that. I think the issue here doesn't apply. To Jose's point, I know that the ordinance, if there is a property that is such a disrepair, that is hazardous, that is dangerous, I believe there are exceptions for that to be knocked down, if you will, because everybody should be concerned about safety. What we're talking about here is in situations where you buy a single family, you knock it down and you want to build a 3 or 4 unit condo. That's for the investor. The family who gets that money is going to get their wealth regardless, because they're going to get whatever the market value is. What this demolition ordinance does is prevents the owner from, if they want to demolish it, they have to pay in, because they're going to make this up in building a 2 or 3 unit condominium complex. And I believe, again, that fee is too low. They need to increase it, because they'll make it up in the selling of those condos, and we need more resources for the community.
We have less than a minute. So, John, the same question. What do you make of Alderman's position?
I think everybody sees the war from their perspective, and their perspective is marked by their interests. I have to take into consideration that the majority of Pilsen residents rent, and I have to take into consideration that the majority of Pilsen are still low income. And I think that you have to balance things and cannot sacrifice one to save another. And in this case, you cannot sacrifice the homeowner to save the tenant, and you cannot sacrifice the tenant to save the homeowner. You have to achieve a balance. And I think a group of policies is better to apply to these cases so that you don't sacrifice one side to save another.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, our time is up. I know this topic, we could be here longer than that, but I want to thank you for your time and for joining us this evening. John Betancourt, Jose Perez, and Raul Raimundo. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rudy Lozano's life was too short. He was murdered at just 31 years old, but his legacy as an activist and community organizer shaped the lives of Chicago's Latino communities in ways that continue to reverberate to this day. Now, Lozano's life is the subject of a new exhibit at UIC's Richard J. Daley Library. The exhibit, called A Search for Unity, Rudy Lozano and the Coalition Building in Chicago, brings together a collection of papers, photos, and other items, including rarely seen video footage of Lozano speaking at a May Day rally in 1979. Here's the exhibit's curator, David Greenstein, with a preview.
His story is really part of the growing story of the Mexican American community in the city in the second half of the 20th century. He was born in Texas and he moved to Chicago when he was very young. His activism started when he was still in high school at Harrison Technical High School in South Lawndale. Still while he was very young, he became a labor organizer in the city. He was really interested in bringing together different communities. While he was still young, only in his early 30s, he moved into electoral politics. He ran for alderman of the 22nd Ward, and he also worked on Harold Washington's campaign for mayor of Chicago at the same time. And there again, he really was looking to bring different groups of people together, Black, brown, and white progressives in a coalition that really helped Washington get elected. So we were able to digitize footage of him speaking at a May Day rally in 1979. And that's great because you can see him as this young, dynamic speaker, and you can get a sense of, the appeal that he would have had as an organizer and politician.
Again, you can find the exhibit at UIC Library. It runs through the fall. You'll find more about this on our website as well. Up next, Parachute speaks with the author of a new book on health insurance and access for Latinos.
When President Barack Obama signed the Affordable Care Act into law 12 years ago, it was designed to reduce the cost of health insurance for people who qualify and increase the number of Americans with access to health care. But despite the ACA's rollout, which included expansion of Medicaid eligibility, the uninsured rate among Latinos remains more than twice that of non-Latino whites. Through extensive personal interviews conducted over 3 years, a new book takes a deep dive into what keeps Latinos feeling locked out of healthcare access. It's called Uninsured in Chicago: How the Social Safety Net Leaves Latinos Behind. And joining us now is the book's author and University of Chicago sociology professor, Robert Vargas. Professor Vargas, thanks for being here. I want to start with the methodology. So you followed 40 mostly Latinos through the first 3 years of the Affordable Care Act. What did you seek to learn from them?
What I sought to learn was the answer to this question of why some who were eligible to apply for either Medicaid or subsidized healthcare through the ACA, why some of them were enrolling and why some were not. And this initially started as going out to community organizations, fast food restaurants, bars, asking if people were interested in talking to a researcher about the ACA. And initially, I had wanted the study to be interview-based, but then I just decided to follow up and continue asking individuals who were uninsured if they wanted to do follow-up interviews, and also if they would allow me to accompany them as they searched for information online or went in person to apply at any of the different centers or organizations or medical centers in Chicago. And so it yielded a lot of the data that the book's based off of.
And what did you learn from them about why so many Latinos still did not sign up for health insurance?
I think the biggest way to sum it up is what I learned is that the legacies of people's experiences with the healthcare safety net and government more broadly from the past, that those legacies mattered tremendously for how people perceived of the Affordable Care Act, how they made sense of information coming from the government, and then ultimately how they decided whether or not to enroll. Because for many low-income uninsured Chicagoans, the first place to go to if you're in really dire straits for healthcare is the county emergency room. And I don't know how many folks make it down to the county emergency room all that often, but the experience is often very hectic. It has very long waits. And then at the end of it, folks are walking away with a very large medical bill. And so that often was a common perception that people, when they heard of the ACA, they thought that that's what it was getting them access to. And so really a big major sort of message from the book is how we might, in the future, we might design new and better policies, but whatever we introduce ultimately has to reckon with what has come before it.
So there's clear trust issues that you find. There has to be better communication. You followed one young man named Nick, whose illness and lack of insurance led to a criminal record. Explain why that was.
Yeah, I think the best way to describe it is that when people are uninsured and they have healthcare needs, a series of events puts them in lose-lose situations. And in the context of Nick, who had asthma and was uninsured, and this was prior to the ACA, his options were to go to the county emergency room and wait while having these asthma attacks, which for anyone who has asthma would know, it's an extremely stressful event that, I mean, makes you feel like you're literally dying. And he would tell me that he avoided going to the county emergency room out of fear that he was going to die in the waiting room. He had another option of going to private university emergency rooms where he could, get access to a doctor much faster, but then end up with a huge medical bill at the end of it and rack up debt. He had another option of trying to save up money, but saving up money for asthma inhalers that cost hundreds of dollars take time for folks who aren't working in high-paying sectors of the labor market. And then a method of last resort was resorting to shoplifting and selling items secondhand and using the income the income generated by the criminal activity to pay for asthma inhalers in the informal economy. He chose the last option, and then ultimately got caught and was imprisoned.
And it certainly suggests that a lot of the underground drug market might be for reasons of health and not just reasons of recreation or getting high or things like that. You looked very closely at some Chicago neighborhoods that were later the hardest hit by COVID. How does what happened during COVID square with what you found when you followed folks in these neighborhoods?
Yeah, as the pandemic was unfolding, it was troubling for me, and I think for many advocates and researchers in Latino communities, because I think a lot of folks foresaw the deep distrust in healthcare that was contributing to low rates of testing initially in Latino communities, and then eventually when the vaccine came out, lower rates of vaccine take-up. And in addition to all of this was the fact that in the initial months of the pandemic, testing sites were much harder to find in Latino communities. And so even as the infrastructure for support unrolled in Chicago, many of the testing and vaccination sites often came late to Latino communities.
So a lot of issues of neglect and a lot of issues of trust, the same issues that you saw cropping up. You have a section of your book devoted to the conclusions to these problems. You talked about communication and building trust. What are some of the other conclusions that you draw?
You know, I think that there's a workforce that could potentially contribute substantially towards addressing these issues. And so the Affordable Care Act initially had hundreds of millions of dollars devoted towards training and hiring what's called health navigators. They're not quite social workers. They're not quite community health workers. Their jobs are essentially to be credible messengers to help connect people to the healthcare system. Maybe not necessarily to restore people's trust in government, because that's a tall feat to do these days. But at the very least, it created an interpersonal connection for people who were deeply disconnected and deeply disadvantaged to feel like they at least had an advocate and someone along their side to navigate all of the potential landmines that come with interfacing with a tattered social safety net. And really, you know, there's lots of ideas discussed in the book, but really, I think both in the short and the long term, investing in different kinds of workforces that can connect, you know, our world-class systems of medicines and hospitals that we do have here in the city with the disadvantaged communities that where distrust and negative past experiences are really high.
All right, Robert Vargas, a lot of interesting research in this book. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And again, the book is called Uninsured in Chicago, How the Social Safety Net Leaves Latinos Behind. And we're back with more Chicago Tonight Latino Voices right after this.
Glad you're still with us. A Chicagoan took the extra time the pandemic provided as an opportunity to start her own side hustle. Now, she's the owner of a shop in Pilsen that connects its customers and their pets with handmade designs from Mexico. Here's Brandis Friedman.
Colorful collars, tiny sweaters, and patterned vests. Pilsen's Pocha Pets Boutique offers unique handmade designs for Chicagoans' furry friends.
All of our items are outfits for cats, dogs, even bunnies, even ferrets. We have really, really tiny outfits, so that will definitely fit your pets.
All of the items are made in Guadalajara, Mexico, by owner Cynthia Soto's best friend, Jessamine Gonzalez Carrasco.
Yo hacía ropa así como para personas y todo. Yo tengo una perrita, una chihuahua. Todos los retazos que me sobraban, pues le empecé a hacer ropa.
Gonzalez Carrasco has her own shop in Mexico, Benito Mota.
Matthew, can you sit?
Soto used to work in childcare. Then the pandemic hit.
I was kind of looking as like for a side hustle, something to do, just not sit at home and wait to see what was happening.
Soto was already buying Gonzalez Carrasco's products for her own dogs. She decided to try selling them to others in Chicago.
Te voy a dar tantos productos. O sea, te los doy, no te preocupes. Y ya en el momento que vayas vendiendo, pues me vas pagando o algo así.
Soto says the business quickly grew from there.
I think quarantine also brought everyone closer together to their pets and or pushed them out the door to adopt pets.
Gunther obviously loves being here, and yeah, everyone that I've ever interacted with here is great.
In March 2021, Soto opened a storefront in Pilsen.
How are you?
The boutique's name comes from a derogatory term. Soto says she was called growing up as a first-generation Mexican-American.
Pocha or pocho is basically a derogative word used by Mexicans to describe other Mexicans that aren't Mexican enough.
Today, Soto embraces the word and says she's working to present it in a positive light at her boutique.
I'm not just Mexican, I'm not just American, I am a mix of both, and I am very proud of that culture because it makes me who I am.
Recently, business has slowed. Soto says they've been experimenting with unique products for pets.
So we're trying our best to keep that alive. We are baking a lot more items. So like the roscas, we did cookie decorating for Christmas also.
But Soto and Gonzalez Carrasco hope to expand business in the future.
Que ya tenga eso de que abarque un poquito más de Estados Unidos y pues yo los principales de México.
I want to grow into maybe California, Florida, just, expand our stores so that other people can see us and see themselves within the name and see themselves like seen.
Again, that was Brandis Friedman with a story. The Pilsen Boutique is currently only open on Saturdays and Sundays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. For more information on the shop, you can visit WTTW.com/news. And well, that's going to be our show for this weekend. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And if you're watching us on Saturday night, know that you can also catch Latino Voices and Black Voices on Sundays beginning at 10 p.m. Also, don't forget to tune in to Primera Hora on Univision Chicago every weekday morning at 5 and 6. I'll be waiting for you. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, I'm Alex Hernandez. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that's proud to serve its community through pro bono legal services.